If it weren't for pity, no one here would have invited you. My father's voice was barely above a whisper, but every word landed like a stone. He stood close beside me, close enough that I could still catch the whiskey on his breath. A violin drifted softly through the ballroom. Across the room, a group of guests clinked their glasses and laughed. A server slipped past us with a tray of champagne. No one had the slightest idea that beside this bar, 21 years of silence had finally come face to face. The golden lights shimmered through the dark red wine in my glass. Tiny ripples danced across the surface with the music. My hand never trembled. I took a small sip, then set the glass down. I suppose that's one way to look at it. He paused, said nothing, just looked at me. 1 second, then another. Maybe he was waiting for me to lose my temper, or break down crying. Just like the 19-year-old girl he'd thrown away all those years ago. But that girl never made it past the front door of that house. She'd been left there, 21 years ago. Tonight isn't about you. His voice cut through the silence again. I know. Good. He gave a slow nod. At least. You finally learned your place. My eyes wandered around the room. White linen tablecloths, perfectly arranged roses, crystal chandeliers washing the hardwood floor in warm light. Everything was flawless, exactly the kind of reception my father loved. Because to him, protecting the appearance of a happy family had always mattered more than protecting the family itself. I've heard plenty about you, he kept going. They said you disappeared after your own family disowned you. They said the Navy didn't keep you around for long. They said, in the end, you came crawling back. He shrugged. Sounds about right. A faint smile crossed my face. Some stories get repeated so many times, even the people telling them forget what the truth actually was. I came because of Daniel. My grandson? He let out a quiet scoff. He's young. He doesn't understand everything yet. I think he just knows how to be kind. For the first time, my father had no reply. His eyes stayed fixed on me, as if he were searching for the 19-year-old girl who had walked out carrying nothing but a worn canvas bag. The daughter he was certain would eventually come home and admit she'd been wrong. What he never knew was that over the last 21 years, I'd crossed oceans he'd never even heard of, given orders where a single second's hesitation could mean someone would never make it home again. Then, a gentle tap echoed through the microphone. The ballroom slowly fell silent. The bride stepped onto the stage, smiling. Before dinner, I'd like to thank someone very special who's here with us tonight. My father let out a quiet sigh. Another speech. But I wasn't listening anymore, because the bride wasn't looking at the groom. She wasn't looking at her parents. She wasn't looking at the head table. Her eyes were locked on mine, and in that moment, I knew the clock that had been ticking for 21 years had finally reached its final second. My father still believed he had ended my story the night he locked that front door. He still believed the woman standing beside him was nothing more than the daughter who had failed and come home because she had nowhere else to go. What he didn't know was that in just a few minutes, the man who had spent a lifetime calling me this family's greatest shame would be the last person in the room to discover who I really was. Maybe, somewhere out there, someone has already decided your story before you've had the chance to finish writing it. If this story feels a little like yours, leave one simple comment. I'm still moving forward. Maybe one day, you'll come back, read those words again, and realize you've traveled farther than anyone ever believed you could. UUFU. Turn 0 file 0. The first time my father told me to leave, he never raised his voice. He never yelled. He never even looked angry. That was the moment I understood. He had never intended for me to stay. I was 19, standing in our living room, holding my acceptance packet to the United States Naval Academy. I already signed the papers. I leave in July. My father slowly folded his newspaper, took off his glasses, set them carefully on the coffee table. Then he looked at me, for a long time. Finally, he spoke a single word. No. Just one word. No shouting. No hesitation. He didn't ask why I'd chosen the Navy. He didn't ask how long I'd thought about it. He didn't ask if I was afraid. Just, no, I've already made my decision. I said it quietly, for the first time in my life. I looked my father in the eyes, without lowering mine. His wooden chair scraped softly across the floor. He stood. You're calling them. And you're telling them you've changed your mind. I'm not. My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked at me, then at my father. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, anything. But in the end, she lowered her head, and stayed silent. The ticking of the old wall clock suddenly filled the room. The military isn't where you belong, my father said. Why? Because it's not the life I want for you. I took a slow breath. But it's the life I chose. The room went completely still. For the first time, my father lost his patience. He pointed toward the front door. If you walk out of this house, don't ever come back. I didn't move. I waited, just a few more seconds, hoping he'd change his mind. Just one sentence. Sit down. Or maybe, I'm just angry. Anything, but it never came. He turned around and walked away, without looking back. I went upstairs in silence, pulled an old canvas duffel from the top shelf of my closet, a few changes of clothes, a notebook, the watch my grandfather had given me. Then, I picked up a photograph of my little brother and me at the county fair. Thomas was grinning from ear to ear. I was holding his hand so tightly, like I never wanted to let go. That photograph was the only thing that still made me believe I'd once belonged in that house. 3 weeks later, I came back. The front door was locked. On the porch were 2 cardboard boxes, my books, my clothes, my winter boots, the blanket my mother used to tuck around me when I was little. Everything had been packed neatly, as if someone were returning forgotten belongings to a complete stranger. Taped to one of the boxes was a small note, just one word. Rebecca. My father's handwriting. I reached out and gently ran my fingers across the faded ink. It had dried long ago, just like his decision. I stood there, for what felt like forever. Through the front window, the curtains moved ever so slightly. I knew someone was inside, and I knew they knew I was standing on that porch. But no one opened the door. I bent down, lifted both boxes into my arms. The cardboard handles dug painfully into my hands, but that pain was nothing compared to the moment I realized what I'd really lost that day wasn't just a home. It was the belief that somewhere in this world there would always be a place waiting for me to come back. The first morning at the Naval Academy started at 4:30 a.m. The blast of a whistle ripped through the darkness. Move, let's go. Combat boots pounded against the concrete in every direction. 40 midshipmen poured out of the barracks. Only 4 of us were women. A cold wind rolled in from Norfolk Harbor, carrying the sharp smell of saltwater and diesel fuel. On that very first run, I finished near the back. My legs felt like they were filled with lead. Every breath burned deep inside my chest. Sweat and rain blurred together, running into my eyes. One of the instructors walked over. He glanced at the name taped across my chest. Morgan. I've seen dozens just like you. They all thought they were tough enough. 3 days later, they were gone. I fought to steady my breathing. Sir, I'm not quitting. He studied me for another moment. His expression never changed. We'll see. The weeks that followed, I became the first one awake every morning. I ran extra miles after everyone else had stopped. I stayed on the training field, long after the lights in the barracks went out. Some nights, I'd sit on the edge of my bunk for nearly an hour. My feet were so swollen, I couldn't even pull off my own boots. But every time the thought of giving up crossed my mind, I saw those 2 cardboard boxes, waiting on my parents' front porch. If I quit, my father would be right, and I couldn't let that happen. Time quietly moved on. Then came our first leadership exercise at sea. The ship had barely cleared the harbor when a massive wave slammed into the hull. The warning alarm blared. Radios crackled non-stop. One of the younger cadets dropped the navigation charts. The wind instantly scattered them across the deck. Everyone started talking over each other. Nobody knew what to do first. The cadet froze, completely overwhelmed. I walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder. Look at me. He lifted his eyes. Take a breath. 1 step at a time. We'll reset. He gave a small nod. His breathing slowed. The rest of the team settled down almost immediately. Within seconds, everyone was back in position. The exercise continued, as if nothing had happened. When the ship finally returned to the pier, the instructor walked past me. He stopped, still without looking directly at me. Morgan, tomorrow, don't be late. Then he kept walking. I stood there, with the smallest smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. In a place like this, not getting yelled at was sometimes the highest praise you could earn. For the first time, I stopped seeing myself as the girl whose father had thrown her out. I was becoming a naval officer, far from perfect, but steady enough to help someone else find their footing when everything around them was falling apart. And that's when I understood. Leadership isn't built by rank. It isn't stitched onto a uniform. It's earned in the moments when everyone else is panicking, and you're still calm enough to take the first step forward. 17 years later, the ocean had become my second home. That night, our destroyer was escorting a convoy of humanitarian aid ships through waters notorious for pirate attacks. The sea was eerily calm. The only sound was the steady rumble of the engines beneath the bridge. Then suddenly, the radar officer shot to his feet. Captain! 3 fast-moving contacts. Every eye snapped to the radar screen. 3 bright blips, racing straight toward the convoy. The distance was closing fast. Seconds later, the watch officer spoke. Maintaining current speed. They'll intercept the convoy. In 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The alarm sounded. The helmsman tightened his grip on the wheel. The communications officer answered one radio call after another. No one said another word. I stepped toward the radar display. Behind our ship were vessels loaded with food, medicine, and emergency supplies. They were slow, completely defenseless. If we changed course to protect ourselves, they would become the first targets. A young officer looked at me. His voice was steady, but only just. Captain, your orders? I didn't answer right away. The bridge fell completely silent. The only sound was the rhythmic sweep of the radar. I looked at the 3 contacts closing in, then at the convoy behind us. There was only one decision to make. I took a slow breath. Helm. Ahead full. Intercept their approach. Put this ship between them. And the convoy. Aye, Captain. The helmsman spun the wheel. The engines roared. Our bow cut sharply through the water, driving straight toward the incoming boats. The distance disappeared. Second by second. No one knew whether the next few minutes would end in a standoff or a firefight. 30 seconds passed in complete silence. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on the radar. Then, without warning, the 3 boats slowed. They turned and vanished into the darkness. A collective breath escaped across the bridge. The young officer beside me spoke quietly. Captain, what if they hadn't turned around? I kept my eyes on the sea. Then, we would have stayed exactly where we were, because behind us were people who couldn't protect themselves. No one spoke again, but I knew. Everyone on that bridge understood. A few months later, I received my promotion orders. Admiral. At the ceremony, the entire room rose to its feet. Applause echoed through the hall. The lights caught the new stars on my shoulders. And yet, the first thing that came to mind wasn't the applause, it wasn't the ceremony, it wasn't even the ship. It was those 2 cardboard boxes, that sitting quietly on my parents' front porch, all those years ago. Maybe, if that door had never closed, I never would have found the courage to walk the path that brought me here today. The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. It sat quietly on my desk. No rank, no title, just 2 words. Written in blue ink that had begun to fade. Rebecca. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It wasn't my father's. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded with remarkable care. The first line read, "My name is Daniel. I'm Thomas's son." A faint smile crossed my face, until I reached the next sentence. "My dad passed away 3 years ago." I froze. The room fell completely silent. I read it again, once, then a second time. The words never changed. 3 years. My little brother had been gone for 3 years, and no one in my family had thought to tell me. Slowly, I leaned back in my chair. Outside my office window, a tugboat eased away from the pier. Its low horn echoed across the quiet harbor. I watched until it became nothing more than a tiny speck on the horizon. Some departures. If you miss them once, you never get another chance. Thomas drifted back into my memory. The little boy who used to follow me around the county fair, always reaching for my hand, always smiling. No matter what happens someday, I'll always be your little brother. I never imagined our last phone call would truly be our last. I closed my eyes, took a slow, steady breath, then kept reading. Grandpa never talked about you, but I found an old photograph. In it, you and my dad were both smiling. I just thought, our family shouldn't end like this. If you still consider me family, I hope you'll come to my wedding. I folded the letter and stood. My eyes settled on the dress uniform displayed inside its glass case, then shifted to the navy blue dress waiting on the chair. That night, I knew exactly what I wanted. I didn't want anyone to see my rank. I didn't want formal salutes. I didn't want curious stares. I just wanted Daniel to have his aunt back. Not an admiral, just the aunt, who had been gone for far too long. 2 weeks later, I mailed a letter of my own. It was short. Daniel. Thank you. I'll be there. Just 3 sentences, but after 21 years, it was the first time I had taken a step back toward my family. Maybe, somewhere out there, there's still a letter that hasn't been written, an apology that has never been spoken, or a phone call that's been put off for far too long. If you still have the chance, I hope someone finds the courage to make the first move. Because sometimes, the words that stay with us forever aren't the ones we said, they're the ones we never got the chance to say. I had just set my wine glass down. My father watched it for a moment, Then a faint smile crossed his face. So, how's life been? These last 21 years? Good. The corner of his mouth lifted. People who fail usually get very good at saying they're fine, so they don't have to explain themselves. I didn't answer. Some arguments reach a point where winning and losing no longer matter. His eyes drifted to the navy blue dress I was wearing. Well, at least you knew how to dress like everyone else today. I came for a wedding. I wasn't trying to stand out. He gave a careless shrug. Don't worry, no one's paying attention to you anyway. Slowly, I looked around the ballroom. Hundreds of guests were still laughing and chatting. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Gentle music floated through the room. Then I looked back at my father. Maybe, you're right, he smiled. Maybe. For the first time that entire evening, he thought he'd won. He had been living inside the same story for more than 21 years. In that story, I was always the daughter who walked away, the failure, the family's embarrassment. He had no idea. My life had taken a completely different path. Done a very long time ago. Just then, the soft tap echoed through the microphone. The conversations around the room slowly faded. The bride stepped onto the stage. She smiled as she looked around the ballroom. Before we have dinner, I'd like to tell you a story. A few guests smiled back. Some still held their wine glasses. Others reached for their spouse's hand. Not a single person realized the story she was about to tell was about the quiet woman standing beside the bar. My father served in the United States Navy. He always told me that throughout his entire career, the commanding officer he respected most was a woman. My father frowned slightly. For the first time since we'd seen each other again, he was truly listening. He told me that during an escort mission protecting a humanitarian convoy, when everyone else was thinking about saving their own ship, she gave one order: move forward. Put our ship between the danger and the people who couldn't protect themselves. My hand tightened almost without thinking. The memory of that night at sea came rushing back, clearer than ever. Slowly, my father turned toward me, then back to the bride, then to me again. His eyes lingered, as though he were trying to fit together two stories he had spent 21 years believing, who never possibly belonged to the same person. I knew it had begun. In just a few more minutes, the man who had always believed that he knew exactly who his daughter was about to discover that everything he'd believed for more than 2 decades had never been true, and the story he had spent 21 years telling himself was about to end, right here, in front of everyone. The bride stepped down from the stage. The soft click of her heels echoed across the hardwood floor. One step, then another. Slowly, the entire ballroom watched her. My father frowned. Where's she going? I didn't answer. I quietly set my wineglass down. She walked straight toward me. Stopped. Smiled. Then, she slowly raised her hand. One crisp, deliberate motion. It wasn't a polite greeting. It was a military salute. I returned it, and in that instant, the room froze. Every conversation stopped. The clinking of glasses disappeared. Even the band fell silent. The bride lowered her hand, lifted the microphone. Her voice trembled. I'd like to ask everyone to raise your glasses. One by one, glasses rose around the room. She looked at her father, then at me. My dad always told me that if it hadn't been for his commanding officer that day, he never would have made it home. Her eyes filled with tears. And if he hadn't come home, he wouldn't be here today, to walk me down the aisle. The ballroom was utterly silent. A few guests slowly turned toward me. They didn't know the story. Not yet. But every one of them could feel it. The woman standing quietly beside the bar, too, wasn't just another guest. The bride took one slow breath, then smiled. Please join me in thanking Admiral Rebecca Hayes. No one moved. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2, 3. Even the violin had stopped. The only sound left in the ballroom was people breathing. The first person to stand was the bride's father. He raised his glass toward me. Thank you, Admiral, for bringing all of us home. Then, another guest stood, and another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet. Applause rolled through the room, like a wave, not for the rank on my shoulders, but for the woman who had brought the people they loved back home. My father never moved. He looked at me, then at the bride, then around the room, at every person standing. His eyes searched desperately for another explanation, any explanation, less painful than the truth. His lips trembled. You're an admiral? I gave a small nod. Yes, for 21 years. You've been serving all this time. I never left the Navy. He swallowed hard, his eyes slowly filled with tears. Why? Why didn't you ever tell me? I looked directly at him. Only a few steps separated us now. But it had taken more than 21 years for a father and daughter to truly face each other. Because I paused. My voice never wavered. Dad, you never asked. He lowered his head. There was nothing left to say. For the first time in my life, I no longer saw the man, who always believed he was right, standing before me, was only a father who had finally realized that what he'd lost over the past 21 years was never his pride, it was his daughter. The applause lingered for a few more seconds, then, it slowly faded. The band began playing again, guests drifted back to their tables, conversations quietly returned. Only my father never moved. He kept looking at me, as if, after 21 years, this was the first time he had truly seen his daughter. You, he said softly, you're really an admiral. I am. He lowered his head, his hands tightened together. All these years, I believed, you had given up. I never did. He nodded faintly. Silence settled between us again. Neither of us tried to break it. The music in the distance seemed to fade away. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as though there were too many things to say, and no idea where to begin. A long time passed, before he finally spoke. Why didn't you ever tell me? I met his eyes. Because, I paused. Dad, you never asked. He closed his eyes. A long weary breath escaped him. This time, he didn't search for excuses. He didn't try to prove he had been right. That night, when I left those 2 cardboard boxes on the porch, I thought, you'd come back. I thought so too. I thought, you'd open the door. His eyes filled with tears. He turned away, not to hide from me, but to hide from himself. For the first time, the man who had always seemed so unshakable, could no longer hide his regret. Slowly, he raised a hand, as if he wanted to rest it on my shoulder. But it stopped halfway, suspended in the air, like he no longer believed he had the right. I stepped forward and gently took his hand, his voice caught. I should have been proud of you. A long time ago. I looked at him, for a long moment. I don't need that. He lifted his eyes. I only ever wanted for you to believe in me. His head slowly bowed. He nodded. It was the most overdue nod either of us would ever receive. A little while later, my father quietly walked away from the reception. His steps were slow. When he reached the hotel entrance, he stopped, turned around, looked at me one last time, then disappeared into the night. I watched until he was gone. Only then did Daniel walk over. He wrapped me in a hug. Thank you for coming back. I smiled. No, I'm the one who should thank you. If you hadn't written that letter, I might never have realized. Our family still had one door that wasn't completely closed. I stepped outside the ballroom. A warm, early summer breeze brushed across my face. The car was waiting at the curb. I opened the door and slipped inside. As it slowly pulled away, I looked through the window. My father was still standing on the hotel steps, but this time, he wasn't turning his back on me. And for the first time, I wasn't looking back, for a door that had already closed. The car merged into the city traffic. The lights of the hotel slowly disappeared behind us. Ahead, the road stretched into the distance, long, unknown, but for the very first time, I knew I was moving forward, without carrying my past, like a weight on my shoulders. Maybe someday, you'll find the courage to walk through a door you once believed you never could. If that day comes, I hope you'll come back and tell me your story. I'd truly be happy to know that in the end, you found your own kind of peace.